Welcome back, everybody, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I am very excited, as I always am, to welcome my colleagues to the show. Today, that's Alex Bickford, who's a former financial aid officer at Southern New Hampshire University. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Usually, we're talking about something related to paying for college, but today, I'm excited because we're talking about something that might have those listeners who still have time planning ahead for that moment. So we're talking about saving for college today. So I'm going to throw out the question of the hour, which is when? When do you start saving for
Yeah,
college?
absolutely. So, yeah, first, this is a favorite topic of mine. I love this topic. I love when I can talk to families. Doesn't matter how old their children are about
Mhm,
this topic. And so that would be the simple answer to your question, would be when you're able to. And
mhm,
so I always say to families who are looking to save for college is that there are a couple of key factors that I like to see for a family to judge if they're able to start. So do you have any high interest debt? Do you have credit card debt? Do you have other personal loans out there that you might need to pay off to put yourself in a better position to save for college? So that would be one thing. Are you saving for retirement in an adequate way? Or are you going to be set up for your financial future down the line? Because
mm.
I guarantee if you ask your kids if they want to take care of you 30 years from now, the answer is going to be preferably not.
No.
So if you are in a position where you don't have high interest debt you're paying down, and when you are in a position that you're saving for adequately for retirement, I think then's a good time for you to start looking at your budget overall and assessing really big adjustments you can make if possible. But even the small adjustments can be really, really huge. So as
Mhm.
far as timing, it's when you are able, certainly sooner the better, but whenever you're able.
Well, with that in mind, I mean, is it ever too late? So let's say you have a student starting senior year of high school. Is that a time to be saving for college or?
Yes,
Yes.
this is what I always say. So if you have a person who's a senior in
Hmm.
high school, right, going to college even this fall.
Hmm.
So how are you going to pay? How are you going to pay for this fall? Even if you're going to use student loans, let's say, as a way to help bridge that gap, which I would say the vast majority of families out there do to some degree use student loans. Well, then you're going to need to be in a position to assess how much you and how much the student can borrow for student loans. So,
Hmm.
and for families, a lot of times that is, well, how much can I afford in a monthly payment? Well,
Right.
what better time to figure out how much you can afford in a monthly payment than using these 6 months before your child starts college and say, well, let's start adjusting that budget. Let's start making monthly payments to some kind of savings mechanism. And maybe I only have enough for books for the first year. That's less than I need to borrow.
Yes.
And yeah, and it puts me in a great position to understand I can afford this in a monthly payment.
Right. Well, I love that advice. And I also, just personal experience of less on the saving for college side, but just on my son started working. One of the things that we did was opened up an IRA for him. And so every week, he puts a third of his paycheck into his IRA. Now we're literally talking some weeks about $30 and other
Right,
weeks, it's 50 or 60. He's already saved something like $4,000 towards his retirement
right,
at the age, he's going to be 18. It's amazing how much those little sums of
right.
money add up and can add up relatively quickly too.
And then for him, and this is obviously a little bit different topic,
Off
but
topic
the,
slightly,
the
but yeah,
compound interest is going to be huge
right.
on that. So when he looks to retire 50 years from now,
Yes.
even if he stopped today, he would be amazed at how much that's going to turn into 50 years from now. So
Right.
thinking back, even if you only have 18 years to save for college, or even if you only have 18 months to save for college,
Right.
whether it's interest or cash flow, both of those could be hugely, hugely valuable.
Right. Well, and I'm kicking myself because I'm thinking, what if I had simply put $30 away every week
Mm-hmm.
when he was born? The amount of money that I might have accumulated up to this point when I thought that I didn't have any money to save, but what was that $18? Who knows what I spent that $18 on,
Right,
but or the
right.
$30 on, right? It is, I think your points, obviously your points are all excellent. You are the finance expert. I am definitely not, but
Right.
you want to pay off those big things
Yeah,
and get rid of those, but if you're doing that and then you happen to have another $15, $10, and you could
absolutely.
pop that into savings, you're also going to feel good like, "Ooh, I am saving," and no amount really is too small, I think.
No, that's 100% true. And what I think that also adds to is, all right, so I'm not able to save vast amount of money today, right? I can't put
Yep.
away $500 a month today, but maybe I can do $15 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe a year from now, I get a raise and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can make an adjustment and maybe I get a tax refund and maybe I can make an adjustment. And maybe I have childcare expenses that end and I can make an adjustment. And so
Mm-hmm.
those things that build over time, generally speaking, when you have a child at birth, you're not prepared to spend $500 a month. You just can't.
Right. Right.
So that comes over time, and building that and setting up that account and having it easily available is much easier than to go from 15 to 50 to 100 than go from 0 to 100 because you haven't had that account established yet. So
Right.
my biggest thing is establish something now. Start putting away, even if it's $5 a month or $10 a month, and make those adjustments over time.
Right, right, exactly. And nowadays you can get the vehicle right on your phone.
Oh
And
yeah,
so, and you just, oh, this is really easy to do. He gets paid every Wednesday. He goes into the
right,
mobile app and he does it. And it's a habit. And that's the other, I think, great thing about it's you're forming a habit. And to your
right.
point, as you have maybe more funds available to you, you're already in the habit. And then maybe that next month you can say, I think now I can up how much I'm giving by like
Right,
10 more dollars or a
right.
hundred more dollars.
I didn't notice that $15. Maybe I
Right.
will notice $50.
Right. Exactly. And if you do, then will you pull back the next
Right,
month,
exactly,
right?
right,
So
absolutely.
I love that idea. Um, this is a really, my next question is, I think, something that can hit us all. I mean, right now, the cost of a 4 years of college at a private institution can run higher than $300,000, right? That
Mhm.
is a massive number. That's a home purchase.
Right,
That is, I think, for many of us, just the idea of ever having that much money
right,
to write a check for is scary. Obviously, very few people write a check for $300,000. They pay for it in installments, they pay for it over time, but the cost is so overwhelming. How do
right.
you help families, or what do you encourage them to think about so they don't get demoralized if they feel like the progress they're making towards
Yeah.
saving for that is really slow?
So the first thing that I would say is that you're in the same boat as 95% of the other people, right?
Yep.
I've talked to on my two hands the number of people in my career that have just been able to pay for college.
Yep.
It doesn't happen. Usually, what I say is it's a three-pronged approach. Whatever your portion is, and hopefully you're getting some financial assistance and some scholarships, and 90% of people who go to college don't pay full price. But for whatever your portion is that you need to cover, it's a portion through past income, which is
Hmm.
savings, a portion through your current income at the time, so that savings leads to cash flow that you have throughout college,
Hmm.
and a portion being through educational loans that you or your student, or oftentimes both,
Hmm.
take on. And once again, that cash flow that you're saving leads to your ability to have buying power or borrowing power
Hmm.
for the loans after college. So
Right.
typically it's that three-pronged approach. So I'd first say, whatever progress you have on this end is something you don't have to do on this end, right? So
Yes.
anything that you save now, first of all, is going to add up over time, going to put you in a position to be able to pay some cash as you get there, and also will put you in a position to borrow less later. So even if it's a relatively what you feel like is a nominal amount, those can make big gains over time. And I will tell you that for the portion of that you save, the people who save for college pay on average 2 or 3 times less for college than the people who don't.
Wow.
And the
What?
reason is that compound interest.
Mm.
Is that compound interest compared to the interest you have to pay on the back end through student loans. So if you had to borrow $1,000, maybe you only need to save over time 800 to get to that 1,000 because of interest. you borrow $1,000, you're going to pay off $1,500 or $2,000
Right.
over time because of interest. So it's more like paying yourself to save and putting yourself in a better position than paying the student loan lender that you borrow from later on to lend you that money.
Right, right. It's when you put it that way, like 2 to 3 times more, that is eye-opening. And yet, one of the things we do here, I know you hear, I don't hear it because I'm not talking to people on the finance side, but well, we're being penalized because we saved, right? And we're not going to qualify for as much financial aid, and that's wrong on 2 levels. And maybe, we have a little bit of time. Maybe you could talk about the 2 ways that's wrong.
So it's definitely wrong on 2 levels. The first level, let's just talk about financial aid. Let's talk about need-based financial aid. Yep. So need-based financial aid is primarily determined by income. It is certainly your assets will play a role, but the role that your assets play is minute compared to the role that your income plays. So if you make $100,000, they may ask you to pay $16,000 towards the cost of college. If you save $100,000, they might ask you to pay $3,000 of that towards the cost of college.
Right.
So it's typically like a 5 times lesser impact on financial aid, your savings compared to your income. So in general, when people come to me and say, I don't qualify or I qualify for less than I think that I should, it's not because you save too much. It's generally because you make too much.
Right, right. Which, so I love that. Like, you're definitely not harming yourself. And then the second reason that's a bad way to think about it is...
Well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say is what you just said, right? Which is that you're going to, if you don't save, now you probably have to take out loans. And now you're going to play more in interest.
So let's just use that family, that $100,000 example. And for some of our listeners, this hits, since for some of the listeners are on either end of that spectrum, but that family making $100,000, let's say they had saved $100,000 over the course of time. So college for them, the college financial aid office is going to say you can pay $20,000 a year because you can pay $16,000 from your income, and let's just say $4,000 a year from your savings. So you can pay a total of $20,000 a year. Well, you saved $100,000. Guess what? You are now prepared to pay for that 80.
Yes.
And let's look at the family who didn't, right? So they just make $100,000, but they have 0 in savings. And let's even say they have debt on top of that. Well, so instead, that family has to pay $16,000 a year. So they've got to pay $65,000, let's just say, for the cost of college. They don't have any money to do it. So they have to borrow that 65, and over the course of time, they're probably paying off 130 on that. And for you to save 100, let's say you even saved 80 to get to 100. So that's where that 2 or 3 times comes into play, because you've earned interest, and that family on the other end is paying interest to get to the same end goal.
Right. Love it. It's earning interest versus paying interest.
That's exactly it.
Brilliant. All right, we have at least one more thing I want to get to. What about families with multiple children? How do you approach this, or do you approach it differently than if you only have one child that you're going to put through college?
Yeah, so, and I know that isn't necessarily the topic for today, but one thing to think about is where you're saving. So when you have multiple children, choosing an education-specific option, usually you feel a little bit less pressure there because they're transferable. So if your oldest doesn't use it, your second will. So I'm not feeling like I'm putting my money in a place where I'm worried about what's going to happen to it if my children don't go to college.
Right.
When you have one child, that child's choice could certainly be that I'm not going to go to college, or I'm going to get a scholarship, or whatever the case may be. And so then you have a little bit more worry. So I would be a little bit more diligent in saying, where am I going to save? Mm-hmm. Now, as far as if you have multiple children and you're looking to save, my whole process is let's find out how to create a balance for them. Mm-hmm. And what is your goal? Is your goal to cover 100% of all 3 or however many there are? Okay, then we can go about that approach. Is your goal to just cover the in-state tuition? Well, let's go about it that way. But we need to find some balance so you're not saving all the money for the oldest or the youngest, and anybody in between is getting left in between.
Right.
So sometimes that's contributing equally to their accounts, but it also depends on if you're starting with a high schooler and a middle schooler, and they're a little bit different in age, you might have to front end the high schoolers a little bit more. So it's about finding that balance and make sure you're doing the best to treat them equitably as possible.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's great advice. Because how many times do you talk to a family where they've got it all saved up for one, the first one,
Yeah,
but then they have no idea what they're going to do about
right.
students two, three, four, and so on.
Right. And if they're saying, hey, listen, I'm going to take out student loans and I'm going to have less expenses because my kids are out of high school and off to college, well, okay. And I'm okay with that if that's your plan. But for so many families, it's, well, we did this for the first one, but we can't do that for the second one. And I
Yeah.
say, well, then, well, that's not that. For me as a parent, I'm saying I couldn't do that. So
No.
try to
Yeah.
find whatever balance it is, and make sure you set those limits with your children. Right? Here's what we've got. Here's what we can do. Here's how we're going to help. But we're doing this for everybody.
Right. Right. Same thing for everybody. Unless, of course, you want to have family fights and rifts over the next like 50 years.
Yeah,
Probably want to try and do the same for everyone.
the best you can, certainly.
Exactly. Alex, thank you so much for joining today. I think, and I hope that this was helpful and that people who are worried or stressed about saving for college had some ideas about things that they can do right away to kind of kickstart the process for
Just take
themselves.
that first step. You'll be in a much better position to take the next step.
Yes, absolutely. All right. We are going to go to commercial, but when we come back, we're talking about what happens if you have decided you don't like your options and you want to reapply in the hopes that one of your top choices will accept you next year. Well, we have some thoughts and we're going to share them.